From 36, Cameron Dicker, the kicker. Never a doubt. Right down the middle. Here we go. Lamar looks to throw it. He's under pressure from Bond, and he floats it up short. It's caught by Flowers, who is hit hard by Okuda, and that'll do it. The St. Louis Dragons have won the Super Bowl. The Lombardi Trophy is headed home to St. Louis, Missouri. At long last, the St. Louis Dragons are Super Bowl champions. We overcame, conquered, and sit atop the mountain. But there's a gust of wind coming to push us off. That gust being the offseason. We've got some really challenging decisions to make. Operating through a very tight budget. Possibly needing to get rid of veterans who have been mainstays for this team and big pieces of our Super Bowl run. We're going to have to make some not so fun decisions today, but we've got to put this team in position to hopefully become a dynasty. It's been an incredible season for us, going 12-5, getting the number 2 seed in the NFC, and of course winning 4 playoff games, all in very different ways, including the Super Bowl against the Ravens. It ended up being an incredible game, down to the final seconds, but when we needed to make plays on both sides of the ball, we did. It wasn't the perfect game from Puma Whitlock, but it was still a darn good one. Winning the Super Bowl MVP, throwing for a score, and rushing for 2 more. Lamar Jackson, the regular season MVP, was also brilliant. Our offensive skill position players stepped up, especially with Arturo Modelo, the offensive player of the year, getting injured in the second quarter. We needed more out of Jamison Williams, Amarion Cephas, Darwin Juskins, and others. While, of course, for the Ravens, the illegal touching penalty in the first quarter by Zay Flowers very well may have lost them the game. A 4-point swing in a game that they lost by 3. I think the offensive line deserves a ton of credit, and defensively, we were able to hold them to 27 points. Ryan Nada, Samasoni Saluni, Simeon Bonnet, and others all played fantastic in this game. And of course, the kicker, Cameron Dicker, going 6 for 6, including the game winner. This team was able to win the big one. It certainly wasn't easy over the last couple of seasons, but I knew this core had it in them. But now we're going to have to make some really tough decisions. We have virtually no cap space this offseason, and we've got a lot of really good players who are not under contract. Before we get to the offseason, though, I want to recognize some guys who stepped up for us in the playoffs with our postseason studs and duds. Since we won the Super Bowl, nobody was disappointing, so therefore there are no duds. But I do want to recognize 3 players who went above and beyond. The overall winner will get a +2 boost to their rating and a development trade increase, while the other 2 players will get +1. So obviously the overall winner, no-brainer choice here, is running back Darwin Juskins. When Milan Santa got hurt late in the year, I said that this is going to be Juskins' backfield. He's going to get more touches and he's going to have to step it up. And boy, did he. He was unbelievable the entire playoff run. Legitimately one of our most important players. 7 all-purpose touchdowns. He scored in all 4 games, including one of the most important in the Super Bowl. So because of that, he will go up by 2. He is now an 83, and he now has star development. I'm not really sure what we're supposed to do with the backfield, because at the end of the regular season, with Milan Santa's improvement and his boost, I kind of figured he would be the main running back next year. But after seeing what Juskins did in the playoffs, I feel like it should be him now. So I'm not sure what we're supposed to do. Our second player here will be Cam Lucifer. He was really disappointing in the regular season. Sure, he won the Defensive Back of the Year, recording 5 interceptions, but you guys saw the games. He wasn't good in coverage at all. We moved him in the slot in the playoffs, and he was fantastic in every single game. The opposing slot receivers never were able to make damage with him covering. So he'll go up by 1 in terms of rating. Keep in mind, he went down by 2 for being one of our duds of the year in the regular season. So he'll get a +1 back, but he still, overall, loses a rating point. I thought about Bugsy Breaks because I thought he had a really good playoff. He was banged up in the Super Bowl, and he played really well in that game. But ultimately, I'm going to go with Ryan Nada instead. Owen Popo, who carries the green dot on defense as the play caller and the captain, got injured in the wild card round. This gave Ryan Nada, at just 23 years old, an entirely new role as the leader of the defense, as the guy in the middle who's calling the shots, and I think he did an admirable job flying around the field. against the Packers and the Panthers. And then in the Super Bowl against Baltimore, I thought he did really well in the run game and in coverage. So he'll go up by 1. He's now an 84 overall, and I'm excited to see what he's going to do in the 3rd season of his career, especially now that Owen Popo will be back from injury. We haven't had a repeat champion yet in this series. The 6 teams who have won the Super Bowl have all been different, and only a couple teams, Dallas and Baltimore, have made it multiple times. So as you can see, it's really not easy to win another one. Once you get to the top of the mountain, it's very hard to stay up there, especially for a team like us who has these big extensions for Simeon Bonnet, Puma Whitlock, and Arturo Modelo all kicking in. We're going to have to make some sacrifices in terms of money. We have $0 in cap space, and we've got a lot of guys to re-sign. Ronrakis Barber, Amarion Cephas, Samasoni Saluni, Malachi Weston, Trajan Blyshenden, Colin Robinson, etc. We have so many important players here, and we do not have the money to pay currently any of them. So before we get to the re-signings phase and figure out what the hell we're going to do, we are going to briefly start with the retirements. There are a lot of big ones around the league. Some Hall of Famers calling it a career on a number of teams, including possibly us. Amari Cooper is done. Chidobe Awuzie is done after 12 seasons. Dalton Schultz retires. Matt Milano, Kendall Fuller, Vita Vea, Tyreek Hill, Ryan Ramczyk. The Rams lose both Nick Chubb and Aaron Donald. Of course, Donald just broke the sack record. I figured it was a matter of time with him, while Chubb finishes top 10 all-time in rushing touchdowns and rushing yards. Aaron Donald never lost a step. I am very relieved that he is out of our division. We've got Tyler Boyd, Dallas Goedert, Saquon Barkley is done in Carolina. Laramie Tunsil retires after just 1 year with the Colts. Chris Jones is done, and then for us, we've got Trey Hendrickson and Joe Mixon. Hendrickson was only with us for 2 weeks. He really didn't play, but Mixon's going to be a bigger loss as a guy who gave us some rotational carries out of the backfield. And we've got some notable players in free agency, including head coach Andy Reid. Big Red is done in Kansas City. That brings us into the player re-sign phase. We re-signed Puma Whitlock and Arturo Modelo during the season, but we didn't bring back anybody else, and we have only $310,000 in cap space with all of these big deals starting to kick in. We do have some veterans who would save us a lot of money by cutting and trading them, but these are some good players. I'm not really sure if I want to do that. So we can clear up some money by restructuring some of these big contracts, kicking the can down the road. By restructuring Puma Whitlock, we save $17 million. We're going to add nearly 10 more with Simeon Bonnet, and then 4 more with Arturo Modelo. Just like that, we now have over $30 million in cap, but we're not done. Sharif Sully saves around $5 million, and all of a sudden, we've got some money to play with. It's not a lot, considering all the players we have here, but $36 million can bring back a handful of guys here. I think the most important player of this re-sign list is safety Samasoni Saluni. His development over the last few years has been really fun to watch. He was great in the playoffs. He was excellent in the Super Bowl. I think he needs to be a priority to come back. He is 27 years old. He's not getting any younger. He's not going to get much better. But I think a 3-year deal for around $36 million would be pretty fair. We're going to have to overpay a little bit, but he says no. The tag is for around $19 million. We don't have that kind of money. So Samasoni Saluni is hitting the open market. Let's look at Amarion Cephas, who's an interesting one because we've got a lot of talent at the receiving court. Jamison Williams could be a cap casualty, but we still have Arturo Modelo. Colin Robinson should be cheap to bring back. Jalen Mallard, the 3rd-round pick last year. Throughout the season, I always figured that Amarion Cephas would be a rental. I figured with all the players we had to extend, he was going to be a guy who is let go. It's not like Amarion Cephas was a superstar or anything, but as I think about it, I think it would be in our best interest to bring him back. I thought he had a good regular season, but in the playoffs, he stepped it up. Sure, he had that really bad drop in the Super Bowl, but other than that, he was clutch in the postseason. And at 25 years old, there's still room for him to get better. An ultra-talented player coming out of college, high 2nd-round pick by the Bucs, didn't really work there. I feel like he showed a lot of flashes with us, and I feel like he's only getting better. And considering the price that he's asking for, I think this is very worth it. It's a real risk putting a lot of money into him, given the talent we have at wide receiver, but for 3 years and $39 million, I think it's worth it. Ultimately, he accepts the contract and will be back. This receiving core is looking very nice for the future. Modelo, Jamo, Cephas, hopefully Robinson, and Jalen Mallard. Are all 5 of those guys going to be on the roster next year? I'm not so sure. But as a group, I think that's a really, really nice set. Ronrikis Barber is another player I would like to prioritize. He hasn't played a ton for us over the last 4 years, but he's been developing, and I think he's ready to become a full-time starter. He really was a full-time starter for us in the playoffs. Once we moved Cam Lucifer into the slot, he started on the outside, and we saw the ups and downs, but overall I think he was good enough, and I think there's a lot of untapped potential with him to where I'm willing to overpay and give him a very player-friendly offer, but he says no. So Barber's going to hit the open market. Obviously, the tag's going to be way too much, and I think there's going to be a lot of interest with him. Malachi Weston's another guy I would like to have come back. It wasn't a perfect season from Weston, but he was our most productive pass rusher other than Bonnet, finishing with 8 sacks. Now, Weston was inconsistent throughout the year. He did not record a sack from weeks 5 through 17 because of injuries and up and down play. He got injured early in the Super Bowl and has really had a hard time staying on the field. But when he was healthy, he was quite good. I think another prove-it one-year deal makes sense for $7 million. He's back. Jabril Fofana is an interesting one because, again, he's not really a full-time starter. But given what he's asking for, I think $6 million a year for him is worth it. We get the splash plays with Fofana, and sure, he isn't the most consistent, but I really like what he can provide for us as a big play threat defensively. I think at 25 years old, there's still a lot of room for him to grow. 3 years, $18 million. He's back. It's risky giving that type of money to arguably our 4th linebacker, but I think he's a really good player, and I think that's super cheap. Now we've got to figure out what we're going to do with the offensive line. Obviously, we're going to accept the 5th-year option for some Andre Mack, but what about everybody else? Bugsy Briggs was a starter for us at right tackle this year. Inconsistent in the regular season, but in the playoffs, he was incredible. Battling through injury, did not allow a single sack. We've also got pretty much all of our depth here. Royal Osuchua can play everywhere on the line. Inazuma Mutsugu, Zach Tom, and Pea Puia are all important players, and we only have $11 million left. I'm going to give Osuchua a 1-year team-friendly deal. I didn't think he would say yes, and he does decline. I think we need to offer some of these other cheaper guys. Mitsugu, 1 year, $4.5 million. He's back. I gave Puia Tatia 1 year, $5 million. He says no. We're not going to look to extend Bugsy Briggs right now. He's asking for a lot of money. I'd like to have him back, but we just can't afford him. I then went back to the idea of tagging Samasoni Saluni and maybe tagging and trading him. I think given his age and position, but along with his talent, he's probably worth around a 3rd-round draft pick. I put him in the trade finder, and I think all of this equates to around a 3rd-round pick. I don't think it's necessarily worth it to do that because I think tagging and trading him handicaps us a little bit financially. We'd still be losing quite a bit of money. So we're going to let him hit the open market, and everybody else here we're not going to offer an extension to. Chance Matsumolo, for instance, he's making a lot of money as a backup because he's a really good backup. Guys like Finnegan Howell-Coleman, DJ Orleans, Trajan Blyshenden, DeAndre Swift, and others will all be let go. Colin Robinson and Cameron Dicker are 2 players I still plan on bringing back. I think we can get them for less money. But everybody else here will not get offered an extension. There are still some players here like Trajan Blyshenden who I wouldn't mind working out a new deal with into free agency. But I want to make sure that we're going to have enough money to still look to offer Samasoni Saluni and Ronrikis Barber and possibly any other outside free agents from other teams. The free agency class isn't great. In terms of young talent, Samasoni Saluni might be the best player here. So there's going to be a lot of interest on him, and I would imagine his price tag has gone up, which certainly is not good news for our chances of bringing him back. Same goes for Ronrikis Barber, given his age and development trait. There is Tristan Whitlock, Puma's cousin, who is asking for a little bit more money. I think given Barber's development trait, though, he is still a guy that we should prioritize. We still are going to be able to restructure some deals, and we also have some guys who we can let go of and save money. This group of 5, Jamison Williams, Isaiah Likely, Jeff Okuda, Demore Diggins, and Darwin Juskins could all be expendable because they all have trade value around the league, and we would save quite a bit of money by getting rid of them. I'm not saying I would trade all 5 of them, but maybe a couple. We're also going to get rid of some younger players like Zeke Mosley and Trey Flynn. Some good prospects, but they're on non-guaranteed deals, and we need all the money we can get. Same goes for pretty much all of the practice squad guys that we have been storing. Players such as Mitch Wiggins, who I really wanted to keep. And pretty much all of these guys here with the exception of guard Jerry Jenkins. He's only making like $400K, and he's like the best player of the group. But everybody else is going to be cut, and that opens up $16 million in cap space, which is just enough to offer both Samasoni Saluni and Ronrikis Barber what their market value is. But since both of them are in the red in terms of player interest, that's not going to be enough to get probably either of them, so we're still going to need to clear up more money. That brings us back to this group of 5. I think Darwin Juskins probably is off the table given that he's a running back and he's a little bit older, so he wouldn't have that much trade value. And what he gave us in the playoffs is invaluable, so I don't think he's a guy we would look to trade. But the other 4, J-Mo, Likely, Okudah, and Diggins, all could be expendable. I think the guy who would make the most sense to trade kills me inside, but it's Jameson Williams. And I think the extension of Amarion Cephas was pretty much the writing on the wall for that. J-Mo's an awesome player, but he did take a step down this past season. And I think we can get some value for him. And with the talent we have at receiver, I think we'll be able to make up for the production. He's missed 7 games over the last 2 seasons. This year, he only had 1 game with over 100 yards. That, of course, was the Saints game where he caught the game-winning touchdown, one of the most important plays of our season. He played well in the Super Bowl when Arturo Modelo got hurt. He's done everything we could have asked for over the last 4 years with 3,000-yard seasons, providing us big plays as our deep threat. But he's 28 years old. He's not getting any younger. He's expiring. And I think it would make sense to potentially look to move off of him and save close to $9 million in cap. Now, these trade offers look quite good, but you got to keep in mind we want to keep it realistic, and we're not going to be able to get some of these really good young players. So I looked around the league at some teams who could look to add another receiver and have money. It would really hurt me to trade him to Green Bay, but they would work. Minnesota's one I think that could also make sense for their young quarterback, Simon Rashid IV. Another team that I think would work is the Titans, who need pretty much everything, but since they're a bad team, they have plenty of money. And if they're hungry for a number 1 receiver, I think it could make sense. The Las Vegas Raiders would certainly work as well. They have a lot of cap space. They're coming off a playoff run with their young quarterback, Erwin Dundee, and they have a big hole at receiver. Cassius Middleton is a legitimate superstar, but behind him, there's not a lot. I think the Raiders and the Vikings probably are the 2 that would make the most sense. And given that they offered a lot in the trade finder, it's pretty clear that both of them would really want him. I think the Raiders would be willing to offer us more, though, because I think they're a little bit desperate for another receiver with J-Mo. Now, unfortunately, they don't have many day 3 picks, which is what I would probably look to acquire in a package. And I think maybe something like this could work, but I'd probably rather get there too because of a player of Jameson Williams' caliber. Not getting something in the top 80 picks would be pretty brutal. So I'm going to offer Jameson Williams a 5th and a 7th to the Raiders for their 2nd round pick this year, along with a 6th and a 5th, and they say yes. Jameson Williams has been traded after 4 seasons to the Las Vegas Raiders. I'm really excited for him in this offense because Cassius Middleton can be the Arturo Modelo for them. Jameson Williams can keep his role, and I think Erwin Dundee's going to love throwing the ball to him. It hurts me because you guys know J-Mo's my guy, but we had to do it. That clears up around $9 million, which is going to make things a lot easier to offer Saluni and Barber. But look, we're not done. We still need more money. Isaiah Likely could very well be a cap casualty, as could Jeff Okudah or Demore Diggins. We have some guys at both of those positions who I think can play. We do lack depth in the secondary currently on our roster, but I think it's a really good free agency class, and if we bring back Ronrakis Barber, that would clear up a hole. So let's talk about the pros and cons of trading some of these guys, because I think it's going to be a much harder decision than what to do with J-Mo. Isaiah Likely's been great over the last 5 years, but we have Wilson Villafana, who we drafted in the 3rd round last year. Then in the secondary, Jeff Okudah's getting a little bit older. He's 30 now. He was a little bit inconsistent last year. I think he would have a lot of value still, though, around the league, despite his age, given his pedigree over the last couple of seasons. In terms of teams that could work, the Bucs are going to offer us a crazy haul. Obviously, we're not going to take Antoine Winfield and a bazillion draft picks, but they seem to want him. We could get Jameson Williams back, which would be funny, but we're not going to do that. So with the teams that work, I think Chicago could make sense. They could use another corner. Ironically, Denver, we could make the Nepo trade and acquire Scotty Pickens Jr. As I mentioned, the Buccaneers need some help in the secondary bad. I don't want to trade him in division, but Seattle could work. And then back to the Titans because, again, they need just about everything. And then Minnesota, I think, could work as well once again. But the Bucs clearly make the most sense here. I think they'd be willing to give us a haul for a guy like Jeff Okudah because they're a good team. They made the playoffs last year, but they have a noticeable hole at corner. I think, again, we'd probably start with like a 2nd round pick and then maybe a collection of other picks or maybe even a player. Like the Raiders, they don't have many day 3 picks, which makes this a lot harder. If we were to go after a young player, I think wide receiver Jackson Hightower or linebacker Luke Henley could work. Now, we're super deep at receiver and linebacker, so I'd rather get somebody else. If we looked at Minnesota, I think safety Hezekiah Harbert could work, but given that he just made the Pro Bowl, I doubt that Minnesota would want to trade him. He is the starter over Lewis Cine, and Lewis Cine wouldn't make sense for us. He's 29 years old and he's expensive. Let's put Isaiah Likely in the trade finder. There aren't many teams who have cap space and really need a tight end bad, unfortunately. I think it would be a lot easier to trade Jeff Okudah, and I think a package with the Bucs' second-round pick and Luke Henley could make sense. Henley's a really raw player, but he's a very, very good athlete. I'm not really sure where he'd play on the defense. He probably wouldn't play a lot this year, but he's somebody who we could develop as a linebacker or possibly an edge rusher. With the extension of Jabril Fofana, Henley would probably be our fifth linebacker, so I don't really see where he would find the field other than him developing. Maybe a guy like Penultimo Barahona becomes an edge rusher. He has the size to do it, but he played so well for us down the stretch, I kind of want to keep him at linebacker. So originally, I was planning on doing the trade, but after I accepted it, I had second thoughts. Do I trust Cam Lucifer to be the number one corner? What about Luke Henley? What are we going to do with him? So I went back on it because I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense for us. Along with that, we haven't re-signed Ronrakis Barber yet. We don't have a lot of depth at corner on the roster. And Jeff Okudah is still a really good player. He hasn't shown signs of regressing at all. And I think we need him more than we need Isaiah Likely because unlike with Okudah, we already have the Isaiah Likely replacement currently under contract. There's no stipulation for it. Isaiah Likely is a damn good player, and he's been so valuable to the development of Puma Whitlock over the last few years, especially when Puma Whitlock was a younger quarterback. It's kind of like a kid learning how to ride his bike, and he needs his training wheels. Isaiah Likely was Puma Whitlock's training wheels. Puma Whitlock now is a Super Bowl MVP. He doesn't need training wheels. And I think Isaiah Likely is a little bit more expendable because of that. I also think he has more trade value than Jeff Okudah because of his production at tight end. He's made 5 Pro Bowls in a row. Given the position of tight end, there are not really any players in the NFL who have had sustained production at that position like he has. So I went back looking for teams who could make sense. The Patriots are in the red in terms of money, but they have a noticeable hole at tight end, and it wouldn't take more than a couple restructures to make it work. I think this is a great landing spot for Likely because he instantly becomes the second option in the passing game. So after restructuring Chase Hunter's contract, New England now has just enough money to make this happen. I think the price starts with a second-round pick plus. They have a lot of depth at guard. I think a player like Diego Formaz could make a lot of sense for us. He has star development. He's only 24 years old, and we're able to come to a deal. Isaiah Likely and a 7th rounder going to New England for a 2nd this year, a 4th, and guard Diego Formaz. This one certainly hurts. Isaiah Likely is one of the greatest players in franchise history. He's one of the last remaining original players from the expansion draft, but given the addition of Wilson Fofana in the draft last year, we can afford to get rid of him, and it saves a lot of money. The Patriots really are the Dragons of the East. With Devin White, they also have guys like DeJuan Overton and Damone Clark, along with now Isaiah Likely. I'm excited about the addition of Formaz. He was a 3rd rounder a couple years ago. He's been on 2 separate teams, but I really like his long-term upside. I think he's got tackle guard flexibility, and he could be in the running to start for us at right tackle. Those 2 trades, losing JMO and Likely, give us 3 second-round picks in this year's draft. Still not a ton on day 3. I want to add more there. But we have 5 picks in the top 100. We may still trade a guy like Demore Diggins, but I think it would be pretty foolish to trade Jeff Okudah because I think he's still more valuable for us than JMO and Likely. And that's because, unlike with the 2 receivers, I don't trust the guys behind Jeff Okudah because there pretty much is nobody behind him. We now have $27 million in cap space. We can still restructure guys like Owen Popo. And now all of a sudden, we've got a lot more money to spend. We can afford a big deal for Saluni. We can afford Ronrakis Barber. And there's another outside free agent that I really want to bid on. And I think we're going to have enough money to offer all 3. If we don't land Saluni, I don't think it's the end of the world because there are plenty of other solid safeties here. But he's a player who I would like to bring back. We're going to give him an even better offer than last time. 4 years, $52 million, and it's a 3-way race with the Bucs and the Jaguars to land him. As for Barber, there's a couple teams interested, and again, I will overpay to get this done. 4 years, $32 million. We seem to be the leader in the doghouse with the Texans and the Jaguars. So with the two of them, we have around $8 million left. From there, we are going to restructure both Owen Popo and Amarion Cephas because there's another player in this free agency class who I really want, who I think is going to be a really good fit for us. I feel good with restructuring these deals because we don't have that many contracts that we have to worry about for next year. So the player who I really want to bid on with Salooni and Barber is defensive tackle Jamiron Barber from the New York Jets. Barber has really developed well over the last couple of seasons with the Jets, and this year he was one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL. 64 tackles, 21 for a loss, and 9.5 sacks. I thought he played pretty well against us when we played them late in the year. That's when I started to pay attention to him, and I figured he could be a real target for us. He is a freak at 6'7", 360, and I think he could possibly give us some value on offense as even a fullback because a player of his size with his speed and strength is kind of scary. We're going to offer him 3 years, $39 million. It's going to be a tight battle between us and Washington to land him. And those are going to be the three offers for us here in stage one. I don't think we're going to get all three of these guys. I'd be surprised if we don't re-sign Ronrakis Barber. Hopefully we get one of the other two. Ideally, we land both, and this defense becomes very frightening. So simulating through stage one, we ended up getting two players to say yes. Ronrakis Barber, I figured was going to happen. It does. Jamiron Barber says yes as well, so he is added to the defensive line. But unfortunately, Samisoni Salooni is gone. He ended up taking the deal from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which surprised me a little bit given the price tag. We gave him a lot more money than Tampa did, but he really wanted to play in a big market. He's a Southern California kid. I think he wanted to play for a team with warm weather. And like how the Patriots are the Dragons of the East, I think the Bucs are the Dragons of the South. So he gets to reunite with some former teammates. The cornerback room looks a lot better with the addition of Barber, and because of that, I think we can now afford to trade a player like Demore Diggins, who isn't really going to be a need with Cam Lucifer likely becoming a full-time slot corner. Diggins has been a really fun player to watch over the last 5 seasons, 15 interceptions in his Dragons career. That's got to be the most in team history, right? And I think the team that makes the most sense for him is probably the Bucs. Pair him up with Samisoni Salooni again in the secondary. Tampa Bay did just sign Nick Sutton at corner, but Sutton's been on like 4 different teams. He's never really been a full-time starter. I don't think he stops you from getting a guy like Diggins. Diggins would become their number 1 corner, and with all the depth that they have at safety, this secondary becomes a real strength. The problem is, like we talked about with Jeff Okudah, they don't really have the pick compensation that could make it work for us. I don't quite think he's worth a 3rd round pick, but I certainly wouldn't want to trade him for a 5th. I think maybe getting a player like Cortez Navarro would probably make the most sense. With the Bucs signing Samisoni Salooni, they really don't need Navarro. He's not some young project player. He's been a starter for them over the last 5 seasons and would instantly replace Salooni in the secondary for us. We'd be saving a little bit of money here as well. So I think we're just going to do a straight-up swap. Demore Diggins makes more sense for what the Bucs need, and Cortez Navarro makes more sense for what we need. I'm going to miss Demore Diggins a lot. He's a really fun player, but I'm excited that he'll be able to reunite with former teammates such as Samisoni Salooni and Griffin Weaver and Tykeem Keon, whereas Cortez Navarro is a seamless replacement for Salooni. I think he's a little bit worse, but he's still quite good. He's only 26 years old. He's not making that much money. And all of a sudden, our secondary really doesn't have any more holes. We have 5 guys who I feel good with as starters. And we also added Jamiron Barber, a total beast, in the middle. We're going to restructure his deal to look to add some more money. We're also going to look to restructure Ronrakis Barber's contract because there's still some additions I would like to make. I don't think our roster is anywhere near the amount of holes that it did, say, 5 minutes ago, but there are still some players in free agency who I think can make an impact. We still have all these draft picks where we can add some guys, but there are some more vets who I think it would be worth to spend with this remaining $18 million. Guard, Kekoa Kaliani is an interesting player. He's only 24 years old, but he's been in the league for a little while. A 1-year deal for $2.5 million I think makes sense. Then again, Howell Coleman on a team-friendly deal. I'd be willing to bring him back for that. We still need more depth up front. So Broderick Hillingham at one point in time was a top defensive prospect, but he didn't pan out because he's a complete idiot. And he did not see the field in Jacksonville because, well, he never learned the playbook. That's what happens when you get a negative on the Wonderlic test. But look, once you come into our building, you don't have to take math tests. This is football, and I think he's a talented football player. I still would like to add another safety, even with the addition of Navarro. And I like Darren Hamilton. He's been a solid player for the Jets over the last 4 years. Never really a full-time starter for them, but as a rotation player, he's been highly productive for them. And I think as our third safety and possibly a long-term starter, we can really get good value with him on a pretty cheap deal. So we're going to offer these 4. We have like no money left, but I think these 4 guys would really be positive additions to our roster. And going into the final stage of free agency, all 4 would accept. I have no idea how we were able to make the money work for these guys, but we did. We're not going to be able to sign some guys like Cameron Dicker right now, but I think they'll be cheaper in the preseason. The one real hole in this roster now is backup quarterback. Again, we don't have the money to spend for that. I would look for us to sign a guy like Jared Goff in the preseason because he's a proven veteran who I think could be a cheap but reliable option for us behind Puma. So that was a lot of drama figuring out who's going to be on our team, but briefly, let's talk about some of the moves around the rest of the league. Despite not signing Samasoni Saluni, I think our free agency worked out really well for us. We were able to get younger, and our roster might be a little bit more well-rounded. In terms of the quarterbacks around the league, the only notable mover was Kyler Murray, and he's probably going to be a backup for the Rams behind Hennessy. The other guys stay with their original teams. The biggest spender was easily the Las Vegas Raiders, adding Marshawn Lattimore, Kenny Clark, Trajan Blyshenden, along with trading for Jameson Williams. That team's going to be nasty next season. Budda Baker signs with Green Bay. The Bucs signed Jalen Johnson. Their secondary all of a sudden looks really nice, adding him with Demore Diggins and Samasoni Saluni. They also signed running back Steel Covey as well. Tristan Whitlock is in our division. He signs with Seattle. The Bucs also get Brian Brzee. Rafael Pryor-Swan signed for literally no money. If I knew he would be that cheap, I would have given him triple that. I know we don't need a receiver at all, but that's like the one archetype I think we could look to add in the receiving corps. Tornado Davis signs with New Orleans. Ironic because he had the big touchdown against them when he was a rookie. Pea Puya signs with the Browns, while a number of notable players from our team did not sign anywhere. I forgot to show Colin Robinson with this group, but he also did not sign anywhere. So let's talk about some trades around the rest of the NFL. Just because we're breezing through the offseason quicker doesn't mean we're not going to make moves for teams. With the loss of Vita Vea, Seattle needs a new nose tackle. They'll be getting Jordan Davis from the Eagles, but Philadelphia's not done. They don't want to pay Devontae Smith, given that they've got young guys like Keyshawn Davis and Dejuan Carroll, so he'll be going to the Vikings for a pretty big package, including a second-rounder. Deebo Samuel is going to the New York Giants for a 4th. He's 33 years old. The Niners want to get younger, but I think he's still quite good. Byron Murphy is going to the Bears. The Rams are going to move up on day 3. And Zay Flowers is going to the 49ers, replacing Deebo. And now Flowers' legacy as a Raven finishes with the penalty in the Super Bowl. Darnell Wright traded in division. The Bears and the Packers making a move. You don't see that too often. I also was looking through the franchise tags. There are some weird players in here. Keyshawn Porter has like 400 career receiving yards, yet he's getting a $29 million tag. I get that he has like superstar development and is a player the Packers want to keep, but I was surprised by that. Anyway, let's talk some NFL draft. You guys know the drill. If you want to use the draft class on PS5, here it is. Dragons Draft 6. We're not going to do a whole pre-draft preview today because, well, we don't have time for that. But if you want to see me go in depth over a lot of these prospects, I will leave a card to the 2 prospect profile videos at the top right of your screen. The big storyline to watch out for us is that we have 5 picks in the top 100. Maybe we look to move up in the first round, but I think we're going to look to move down a lot because we need more depth on this roster. Our 3 division rivals had the top 3 picks in the draft, the Rams, Niners, and Seahawks. Could they look to pick a quarterback? I wouldn't rule it out for any of them, and because of that, I imagine one of them will pull the trigger on Cal Zachary Bridger. The Rams have Gavin Hennessy, but he was not very good as a rookie. Tyler Nguyen in Seattle was really disappointing last season, and Brock Purdy hasn't really taken the steps that San Francisco would hope for as they look to potentially reset. I'm not sure which team is going to do it, but bearing a trade, again, I think one of them is going to pull the trigger. The mock drafts seem to think it'll be the Rams at 1. I would be pretty surprised by that. Gavin Hennessy was a top 10 pick, and given how bad their roster is, I'd be surprised if they gave up on him so quick. Now, if they think Bridger's a really good prospect, I could see them looking to shop the pick to make sure that he does not end up in the division. As for us, they have us picking a running back in the first mock draft. I'll tell you right now, that's not going to happen. The other 2 are a little bit more reasonable. They have us picking a guard. It never hurts to improve the offensive line, and even though I think tackle is a bigger need for us than guard, it's a lot more realistic than a running back considering we already have 2 pretty good ones. So with that, let's get this show on the road. The 2029 NFL Draft is now here. I still want to go in depth for a lot of these picks, but again, since this is abbreviated offseason, we're going to move quite a bit faster. So with the first pick, the Los Angeles Rams select Malik Moses, edge rusher out of Florida State. They won't pick the quarterback. They want to stick by Gavin Hennessy. I think it's the right move because their roster is quite bad. The Niners will also not go QB. Instead, they're going to add to their pass rush with Darpees Emmajoy from Texas. He is an 85 overall and looks like a complete monster. So two of our big rivals just added some freaks to their pass rushes. Seattle has an opportunity to pick the quarterback, and they will do it. Zachary Bridger only has normal development, but he's an 83 overall and has a rocket for an arm. Tyler Nguyen this time last season looked like the franchise quarterback, but he was really bad last year, and it's not like he's super young. He's 26 years old. He's only 1 year younger than Puma Whitlock, and Seattle's going to make their move now. The Titans are on the clock at pick 4, but not for long. Somebody's moving up for a quarterback, and it's Atlanta. Desmond Ridder has been quite good for the Falcons over the last couple of seasons, but how Atlanta sees it is their roster is set. They have no holes on this team, and Desmond Ridder's not getting any younger. They haven't been able to win the big one with him, so why not sell the house? 2 1s, 2 2s, and 2 3s while taking on Dan Moore Jr.'s contract. It's a whole lot, but it might be worth it because you're getting a franchise quarterback while Tennessee gets a treasure chest of draft capital. Atlanta ends up selecting Notai Jean-Pierre from Stanford. He, again, only has normal development, but he is a 78 overall and looks quite good. Of the 4 quarterbacks drafted in the top 10 over the last 2 years, they all have normal development, which is quite interesting, even though some of these prospects look quite good, such as the 2 this year. Let's go quite a bit faster now. With the 5th pick, the Lions get Kentrell Poster, adding to their pass rush. I don't think they expected him to fall to 5, so this works out really well. Neville Ramsey goes to the Browns. Ty Pollendy goes to the Bengals. He looks really good. Houdini Asambola to the Cowboys. Abraham Carr to the Bears. He's a monster. He was the number 1 guy on our board. I figured there was no chance we would get him. Other notable picks here include Gerard Omafodable. He goes to the Washington Commanders. Josiah Cameron to the Dolphins. The talent here very clearly not as good as some of the guys who went in the top 5. A lot of players in the 70s. A lot of guys with normal development. Stanley Icevich is only a 72. But the Vikings make up for it with Drago Rodrigo at pick 17. That brings up the Broncos at pick 18, but not for long. There's a guy on the board who I thought should have gone in the top 6 or 7 picks. I have no clue how he's still there. I don't want the New Orleans Saints to get him. We're going to have to overpay and give up a lot, but I think it's worth it because I think there's a superstar waiting for us. A 1st, a 2nd, a 3rd, and a 6th. For the 18th pick and 2 5s. Denver has some extra day 3 picks, which is what we still need. While they are getting a king's ransom, they're staying in the 1st round while adding a 2nd rounder this year, the highest of our 3 seconds, along with a 3rd next year. I get it's an overpay from our perspective, but there's a guy who should not be on the board here. So the question is, who's the player I'm referring to? There are some guys who it could be. Karan Arnold, the tackle. Duncan Fleetgo at guard. Aradian Edit at defensive tackle, Warwick Eldridge Jr. or Dre Harris at linebacker. So with the 18th pick in the 2029 NFL Draft, the St. Louis Dragons select Warwick Eldridge Jr., edge rusher from Texas A&M University. How is this guy still on the board? He is one of the 5 best football players in the draft, and it makes no sense that he's on the board here at pick 18. Now, interestingly, he only has normal development, so maybe there are some character or work ethic concerns that other teams found that we didn't. Nonetheless, I think this kid is an absolute game wrecker on the edge, a dynamic pass rusher who can take over any game defensively. He's inconsistent as a run defender. There are some splash plays there, but I don't think he's going to play a lot for us on early downs. I think he's somebody who's going to see the field 60% of the snaps as a rookie and play opposite edge of Simeon Bonnet. We have been waiting to get a dynamic complement for Bonnet, and I think this is the guy. Eldred's going to come in as an 80 overall, and some of his initial ratings look insane. I think he has 89 speed, but he also had 39 reps on the bench. He's going to play defensive end, so he's a little bit undersized at 6'2", 243, but I don't think that's an issue because he has the quickness to get by tackles, and he has the strength and physicality despite being smaller to deal with them. Normal development is not ideal, but you know who else was an 80 overall with normal development when we drafted him? Simeon Bonnet was, and, well, we all saw how that pick turned out. As for the rest of the first round, the Saints still end up with a really good pick, getting Ezekiel DeJean, the guard out of Penn State. New England gets, I think, the best receiver in this class, Darcy McKenna from Cal. Karan Arnold, the tackle, goes to the Bills. I think that's a great pick. Aston Jenkins to the Bucks. He was a guy I really liked and was my realistic target going into the first round before Warwick Eldred ultimately slipped. The Raiders picking a running back is a little bit of a surprise. Josh Jacobs is still quite good, even as he's gotten older. Duncan Fleeko to the Packers. I think that's a really good pick, nearly an 80 overall. Arnold Bailey's a solid pick to the Colts. Dakari Pickett, great move by Carolina, one of the youngest players in the class. And then the final pick of round 1 is safety Beverly Archibald. So overall, a pretty exciting first round. 2 quarterbacks, Atlanta with a huge trade to the 4th pick, while we move all the way up to pick 18, getting Warwick Eldred Jr., the edge rusher out of Texas A&M, who, again, I have no clue how he fell to the 18th pick. And that brings us into round 2. We went into the episode with 1 second-rounder. Then we had 3. We still have 2. But obviously we used the pick we got in the Isaiah Likely trade in order to move up for Warwick Eldred. We're not going to go over every pick, but some of the notable ones is the Rams add to the defensive line with Aduran Edit. Kalawaye Sasivila, the quarterback out of the USC, goes to the Niners. Could this be the long-term Brock Purdy replacement? He's raw, but could be quite good. Seattle, the great pick, getting Tazwell Hudson, the safety. Walker Bolton goes to the Bears. He looks like a beast. Cornerback Ricky Palacios was a guy I liked. He goes to the Texans. And then Reginald Fletcher, a tackle I was eyeing up, ends up going a couple picks before us to the Chargers. I don't know if I would have picked him with this second rounder. I probably was going to target him with my second rounder. So it's still unfortunate that he got picked, but I don't think he was my target here. With the exception of Fletcher going earlier than I expected, I think the board has played out really well for us. And because of that, there's a lot of teams who really want this pick. And we got some great trade offers. And I'm going to say no to all of them because there's a guy who should have gone in the first round who I have no clue how he's still on the board. With the 26th pick of the second round, the St. Louis Dragons select DeAubrey Thomas, wide receiver out of TCU. So the Dragons are adding to the skill position group. Jamison Williams is gone. Isaiah Likely is gone. But now we're adding a guy in DeAubrey Thomas who I think can provide a bunch of different roles for us at receiver. He will strictly play on the outside, and I really like what he brings. At 6'2", 220 pounds, he's thickly built. He's got long arms and big strides as a route runner. He's somebody who can be physical and make plays over the top. He has a really good release point. He has a great separator. The question with him, though, is his explosiveness and launch speed, but I think it's still pretty solid for someone his size, and I think he's pretty good with the ball in his hands. He's a 79 overall with hidden development, so our scouts were right. This guy is a complete steal. Assuming Colin Robinson is back, I'm not sure if he's going to start right away, but he's probably going to sooner than later. He looks like a monster. Eden Peoples Jr. was the guy I would have picked with our second choice. He ends up going to the Chiefs. Xavion Creed to the Colts. We weren't targeting him, but that is Zion's brother. And then Jack Popo, the pick before us, to Baltimore. After we got Thomas, the 2 guys I wanted were Eden Peoples and Jack Popo. Neither of them make it to our pick. So we get kind of screwed over. And because of that, well, we don't have a backup plan. Popo was the backup plan. So we're going to look to get out of this pick. And this trade from the Bucs looks really tempting. We'd be moving back around 23 spots. We're not adding any day 3 picks this year, but we're adding 4 over the future years. And we can use some of these day 3 picks in trades to get back into the draft this year. So it's another deal with Tampa, and they will make the final pick of the second round. We went into the day with 1 second rounder. We had as many as 3. But we still only ended up with 1. Arguably the best player in the round, DeAubrey Thomas at wide receiver. He looks like a beast. Into the third round, the only notable pick before us was quarterback William Windsor to the Giants. He doesn't look that good. I don't really know why they picked a quarterback. And with that, we are on the clock with the pick that we got from the Bucs. We now have 2 picks here in the third round. I think we're going to keep both of these picks because there are a handful of players who I do like here in this range of the draft. With the 23rd pick in the third round of the 2029 NFL Draft, the St. Louis Dragons select Delvin Scarimer, offensive guard out of Kansas State. So St. Louis will look to add to the offensive line here in the third round. As I've been saying, I think tackle's a bigger need for us, but I think Scarimer is a lot better than all the tackles on the board. And I think with his athleticism and his size, he very well could convert to tackle, especially he adds another 20 or so pounds. I think Scarimer is one of the best pass protectors on the interior line in this draft class. He's not great as a run blocker yet, but in pass pro, he's really polished. He's got great footwork, and I think he could be a starter for us sooner rather than later, whether it's at tackle or it's at guard. I think he's going to be a pretty good player for us, and with hidden development, there's a lot of room for him to grow. He's going to come in as a 74 overall. He'll be competing for the right tackle spot with 3 or 4 other players. But again, even if he doesn't get that spot, we'll be having him develop behind some of our current offensive linemen, and I think he could be a good depth piece. That brings us to the 32nd pick in the 3rd round. With pick 96, the St. Louis Dragons will select Kyson Wilkerson, safety out of Ohio State. The Dragons seem to like these physical anomalies. They drafted 6'6" Ryan Nada. They drafted 6'7" Jabril Fofana. Wilkerson is the next up, a 6'4", 240-pound safety. This is somebody who you can put at safety. You can put him in the box at linebacker. Hell, you can even try him as an edge rusher. I think he's a really good tackler and a really good run defender, and I like what he provides in coverage as well. I think his role in the NFL will be as a box linebacker, which definitely is not a need for us. We've got 4 good ones already, but I think he can develop behind those guys and possibly be a starter for us down the line. And again, somebody with his physical attributes, I felt like we couldn't leave him on the board. He ends up being a 72 overall. I'm excited to develop him. I'm not sure if he's going to play a ton this year, but I do like his upside. Overall, a pretty good 3rd round for us. We stick and pick with the 2 selections, adding a guard with Delvin Scarimer and a defensive chess piece with Kyson Wilkerson. Again, what position he'll play long-term, I don't know, but hopefully he plays somewhere. Into the 4th round, Rodrigo Juskins, Darwin's brother, ends up in Dallas. I think that's a good spot for him, and there's a lot of good players who ended up going in the 4th round here, as you'll see. Fred Udoka with the Rams, Legend Robinson with the Texans, Oda Rafa to the Broncos. He was a guy we were kind of looking at, an older defensive tackle with a lot of talent. And then Lancelot Cooker, the pick right before us to the Falcons, looks like a total steal. We definitely were not going to pick Cooker, but my goodness, does he look good. So now, with the 21st pick in the 4th round of the 2029 NFL Draft, the St. Louis Dragons select Deku Etienne, linebacker out of LSU. Yes, I know we're hoarding linebackers. We have like 5 or 6 at this point, but I think he's clearly the best player on the board. And in the NFL Draft, it's all about value, especially on day 3. Etienne plays with a chip on his shoulder. This kid flies around the field. Defensive captain for LSU. He held the green dot. I think he could be a long-term replacement for Owen Popo, who's 28 years old. He's not getting any younger. I think Etienne is a really smart player, and physically he's quite talented. He's going to come in as a 77 overall. For the 4th round, this is a phenomenal selection. There's not really an easy spot for him to get playing time with all the depth we currently have at linebacker, but it's going to be hard to keep him off the field because he looks awesome. Now we're going to look to make a trade going back into the 4th round. As I said when we got all those picks from the Bucs, we're going to use some of them to move back in, and that's what we're going to do here, acquiring a selection from the Packers. With the 126th pick, the St. Louis Dragons select Richard Rushing, running back, Texas Tech. Who better to play running back than the guy whose name is quite literally Rushing? This is another player who I'd consider a physical anomaly. He's a 6'2", 250-pound power back who can give you production in the short yardage game, and he will be our short yardage back this year. But he also runs a sub 4.4. This is somebody who is a dynamic playmaker and moves at his size like no one's business. I think he could be a long-term starter for us, given that Darwin Juskins is not getting any younger, and who knows if we extend Milan Santa long-term, given his health issues throughout his career. As Rushing will come in as a 73 overall, I'm excited to see what he'll be able to provide for us this year as our 3rd back, but I think his upside for a 4th rounder could be really interesting, and I'm intrigued to see if he is able to develop into the player that I think he could possibly be one day. Along with Rushing, there was another guy I was kind of wanting, that being quarterback Antoine Bordeaux. He goes with the very next pick, and he looks kind of nice. 71 with hidden development to the Colts. So that wraps up the 4th round. We add 2 more players here with linebacker Deku Etienne, along with running back Richard Rushing. That brings us into the 5th. Seattle gets a stud in the secondary with Idris Skinner. And that brings us here with the 8th pick at the 5th round. The St. Louis Dragons select Amir Strauss, quarterback out of the University of Alabama. For the first time since season 2, we're drafting a quarterback. Strauss is an interesting player. For one thing, he's a lefty. He's undersized at 5'11", 210, but I think he's got intriguing skills. He's got a strong arm. He's really accurate within around 20 yards of the line of scrimmage, and he's mobile. He can make plays as a runner. I'm not entirely sure if we should trust him as a backup quarterback, given that he's a rookie with only 1 year of Power 5 starting experience. But I think the talent is there, and he could develop into a pretty solid player despite the lack of size. We really wanted the kid out of Boise, but I think this could be a solid consolation prize, as he'll be a 69, nice, with normal development. The first normal development quarterback we've ever drafted. If we can improve the deep ball with him, I think he could be pretty good. Other notable fifth-rounders included Scotty Vastabillen and Cody Appinger, both of whom were 78 overalls. My goodness. That brings us here to our next pick here in the 5th round, the 18th pick of the round, in which the St. Louis Dragons select Nolan Meadows, center out of Minnesota. We're going back to the interior line. Again, I don't think there's a lot of great tackles in this class, so rather than reaching for one, we're going to pick a good interior player, this time a center. Meadows is interesting because I think the only issue with him is size. 6'1", 310. He's a little bit on the smaller side. If he was 2 inches taller and 25 pounds heavier, I think he'd be a top 50 pick in this draft because he has top 50 skill. I like his athleticism a lot. I like what he can do in the run game, and I think he's solid enough as a pass protector. He'll be a good backup for us behind the rookie, or no longer the rookie, but the rookie last year, Mason Rosenberg, and I think he can move around on the offensive line and play a few different spots. He's a 75 overall, so my assessment was correct. This is a top 50 player in the draft. He just slipped because he's small. Justice Fulton, a super tall corner out of Alabama, was a guy I was starting to eye up. He ended up going with the very next pick. And that brings us here to this 5th rounder with the Raiders, and we're going to move up and get it, trading a 2031 4th. With the 32nd pick in the 5th, the St. Louis Dragons select Sean Karn, a defensive back out of North Carolina. We traded this pick earlier today to the Raiders in the Jamison Williams deal. Now we're getting it back, adding to the secondary with Karn, who I thought was going to go in the 3rd round. He slips a little bit, and we'll gladly take him. We have a lot of safety depth. So on one hand, we don't really need a player like this, but I think he's versatile. I think he could possibly make the move over to corner. At 6'1", 210, I think he's got the size and length to play on the outside, but I think being that he's a safety and knows how to develop the run, he certainly has the physicality and is probably going to be better off immediately in the slot. He's going to come in as a 70 overall, and again, I like his skill set a lot. I'm really surprised he fell this late, and we're going to capitalize off of everybody else's mistakes. So we end up with 3 players in the 5th round: quarterback Amir Strauss, center Nolan Meadows, and defensive back Sean Karn. We have 2 more picks to go, including Mr. Irrelevant, along with the 26th pick in the 6th round. The St. Louis Dragons select Rick Gafford, tight end, out of Oklahoma State. With trading away Isaiah Likely, we only have 2 tight ends on the roster. And while, again, I am confident in Wilson Villafana as the starter, we need more depth. Gafford is a guy who I think comes with good athleticism. He's got good hands right off the bat as well. He just needs to learn the little things. He's not a great route runner yet. He's inconsistent as a blocker, but I think he's got the physical tools to be pretty solid, and he'll develop as our 3rd-string tight end behind Villafana and Gift Aaron Jr. So far, he is the lowest-rated player we've drafted, only coming in as a 67 overall, but he's also one of the youngest at 21 years old, and with his athleticism, I think he's got some upside. He ended up being our only pick here in the 6th round. There were some guys I like. I almost picked cornerback Jonathan Green, who ended up going to the Ravens. He looks kind of good, so we might have missed out. Part of winning the Super Bowl is that we get Mr. Irrelevant. With the final pick, number 224 in the 2029 NFL Draft, the St. Louis Dragons select Francis Francer, wide receiver out of Ole Miss. So we're going back to the receiving room. We got DeAubrey Thomas in the 2nd round, and now we get Francer, 6 foot, 200 pounds. He's kind of a big slot. I don't know if he has physicality to play on the outside, but I do like his size and speed. He's a good route runner. He's got surefire hands. But what I like most about this kid is his character. Incredibly hard worker. First guy in, last guy out. Blue collar, hard hat type of mentality. And when I watch him, the word I think of is grit. He plays with toughness and grit. But off the field, he's as good as it gets. He's the type of kid who you want your daughter to bring home. But on more of a serious note, I do actually think that this guy's going to be a pretty good player. 69 overall. Nice, with normal development. I think he'll be solid depth behind the receivers who we currently have on the roster. So that wraps up the 7th round, and that'll do it for the 2029 NFL Draft. I think we made out extremely well. I have no clue how Warwick Eldred and DeAubrey Thomas both fell as far as they did. I did not anticipate on landing either of them, and the fact that we got both of them is incredible, along with the rest of the draft turning out as well as it did. The final order of business is preseason free agency. The problem is we are in the red in terms of cap space. So we're going to restructure Jabril Fofana, JT Robinson, and Darren Hamilton. We now have a little over $1 million in cap space, and we still need to add more. We don't need Kekoa Kaliani with all the guards we added, so we're going to cut him. We're going to trade Aaron Mayer to the Raiders, swapping a 6 for a 7. We're going to send Cohen Della Vienna to New England for a 7th, and we're going to cut Jerry Jenkins. In the NFL, you cannot restructure rookie contracts, but you can mess with them after a player's 3rd season. So we're going to restructure some Andre Mack. He'll be getting more money with the 5th-year option. And now we're going to have enough money to sign Cameron Dicker and Colin Robinson back. We're not going to have enough money for anybody else, which is unfortunate. I was hoping to sign one of Bugsy Briggs or Royal Osachua, but I like all the offensive linemen we added. I think we'll be fine. I also said I wanted to sign Jared Goff. But for now, we're going to roll with 2 quarterbacks. Now, knock on wood, if something happens to Puma Whitlock and Amir Strauss doesn't end up good, we'll find a way to make it work. We'll get a good backup. So this roster looks quite a bit different. It's a lot younger. There's only 3 original players from the expansion draft. There's only 4 real people left. Puma Whitlock is the 5th oldest player on the roster. That's how far along we are. Nonetheless, I think we had a great offseason, adding a lot of young pieces in the draft with Warwick Eldred and DeAubrey Thomas. I think we made out well in free agency, adding Jamiron Barber to the defense. We've got young players developing like Srijan Bazar, who has superstar X Factor. I haven't even mentioned that yet, but that's something to note for the future. And looking at our schedule, I think it should be pretty fun. We start on Thursday night with the Ravens. Sunday night, week 5 against Carolina. That game's going to be marked on the calendar. We have 5 primetime games total this year, which I'm quite excited about. I hope everybody enjoyed the offseason. Certainly was not easy letting go of guys who have been here for a while, like Jamison Williams, Isaiah Likely, Demore Diggins, Trajan Blyshenden, and a bunch of others, but I think it was all in the best interest of the team, and I'm excited about the future for the Dragons. I'm not entirely sure how we're going to format the season yet. Again, we're going to go quite fast. I'm not entirely sure how many games per episode yet, but hint, hint, it's going to be quite a few. Nonetheless, I hope everybody enjoyed. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Peace out.